You can now get a 30-day trial to experience The Athletic for free. Visit the link in the description below to try it now.
Hello, I'm Alex, I'm an analyst at Tifo. Today we're going to be talking about Diego Simeone and why he has abandoned the 4-4-2. So the classic Simeone 4-4-2 that we associate with him, that we associate with Atleti and with Cholismo, kind of looks like this. Don't pay too much attention to the player names because I haven't changed many of them. This is not reflective of the 2013-14 title-winning season. What you've got is this nice narrow, no, not like that, there we go. Nice narrow back four, like this. You have a low block here from your midfield, again, nice and narrow, everything's compact. And then you have two strikers, one of whom probably often is down here. If the other team's playing with a defensive midfielder, that striker will be responsible for pressing and hassling that conducting player there. And then you've got another striker here, kind of ready to pounce on the break. And what Atleti liked to do when they were in attack, which was relatively infrequently, was they would burst forwards here. These fullbacks would push up very, very high like this. The strikers would kind of look to play off the shoulder, maybe one here kind of connecting. This was the Griezmann role before he moved on. This is the sort of Diego Costa role here. You'd have a midfield that would, look to spray passes out wide like this. But generally speaking, this midfield was composed of pretty flexible players who could play in a variety of different positions. So people like Sol Niguez or Koke or now Marcos Llorente, that versatility. They could be tasked with different tactical instructions, but the main aim was to keep it tight, move the ball quickly into the wide areas, and then exploit the dynamism of the attacking line and the attacking line's movement and ability to work as a front two and cause opposition defenses problems. The rest of the time, they're sitting back, they're keeping it tight, minimal space between particularly the defensive and midfield lines. Then looking to spring forwards, obviously set pieces were a big thing when you had players like Diego Godin at centre back. And that was how they played. And, when the rest of Spain was very much in a kind of juego de posición, 4-3-3, lots of fluid movement and rotations, Simeone was this outlier playing this kind of granite style of football that was ugly and effective. And Atleti really bought into that as well. And they kind of cast themselves almost as the villains of the piece, and they took strength from the fact that nobody liked their style of football. It wasn't sexy, it wasn't flamboyant, but it was incredibly effective. That's how they won La Liga back when they did in 2013-14. So if you're really associated with this style of football and it's effective, why would you change? Well, let's have a look at what the 3-5-2 system does now and try and explain how Simeone's got his team playing currently. So this now is the kind of 3-5-2 system. Like I said, this is the lineup that they used against Celta Vigo in the opening fixture of La Liga. Some of these players obviously will change over time. So, you will get people like Luis Suarez coming on and playing here. Carrasco can play here as a left wing back instead of Saul. Saul maybe can play in central midfield. This is one of the things with this Atleti squad is that they are really versatile. They have some of these players like Koke, like Llorente, like Saul, who can fill in a variety of different positions. And that gives Simeone massive tactical flexibility on a game-by-game basis. Brief intro into the system. It's actually not that complicated in terms of what one might expect from a well-coached 3-5-2 with players of very high quality. But it is still worth running through it briefly. So when they're building up from the back, obviously Jan Oblak here is probably the best goalkeeper in the world. Your centre-backs will split nice and wide here. That will allow the wing-backs to push up here like this, or potentially, let's say, tuck inside and allow this midfielder here to push out so that you maintain the shape. One of these midfielders will likely push forwards. You do get a defensive midfielder, someone like Kondogbia here dropping in a little bit, but more often it's Koke. Koke is really the key man in this new system. He started life as a very industrious, physically adept kind of box-to-box midfielder, but he always had the passing ability and the talent to be more of a conductive player. And that's what Simeone's harnessing now in this new system. So Koke will drop back in here. Because the centre-backs have got these passing options, no, stay there, yeah, there we go. The ball can then be funneled through to Koke and he can start spreading the play out wide, hitting these players here. You know, if Llorente's not here, you've got someone like Kieran Trippier, who's obviously exceptional on the overlap, getting the ball in, crossing it quickly. Then up front here, I mean, in this first game, it was Carrasco and Correa, who I think will have a really, really good season. He's a player to keep an eye on. There's a lot more movement here between the lines with these players. So there's more swapping around. These players are more positionally fluid. Carrasco, like I say, is a wing back. Correa is kind of like an attacking midfielder, shadow striker. So there's not necessarily a default 9 unless Suarez is playing. Let's swap Suarez in for Carrasco and show some of the benefits here. So Suarez is not the kind of player who's going to be right on the shoulder, bursting through onto long balls and so on. He's slightly slower now, but still a very, very powerful striker, positionally very aware. So this system here, where you create a kind of almost like a 4-1-5 shape, that allows Atleti to get more players in and around the box. There's more movement and rotation, whether it's these midfielders pushing up or it's someone like Correa dropping off. That disrupts the opposition defensive shape and creates a bit of space here for Suarez. If it's not Suarez and it's someone like Carrasco, then you've got these players here that are operating in this really dangerous pocket of space here. So between the opposition midfield and defensive line, but they're sort of flexible and fluid. No one is positionally tied in. And then you have a player like Lamar here who has operated as a wide player, has operated as a second striker, but he's the sort of free 8/10 pushing up from central midfield. Again, just looking to disrupt the opposition shape. So there are two key points here, which is that it facilitates Atleti's ability to build up from the back. With someone like Hermoso here, who has also played as a left back, you get a left-sided centre-back who can push forwards. It makes it easier to bypass the opposition first line of the press. And then up here at the top of the pitch, you get more rotation, more fluidity. You get players that are better able to support a slightly more static striker. That's really helpful. You get runs that disrupt the opposition defensive line, and you make the most of these guys out wide, whether it's Saul or sometimes it's Renan Lodi. He's really good at this as well. Could be Trippier, could be Llorente. But Atleti have got a couple of wing-backs, 3-4 wing-backs who are really, really aggressive and good at getting forwards and delivering crosses. And so this system basically maximizes both of those things. So that's how the system is now playing. But as I said at the beginning, Simeone was, really well associated with this system. It was bringing him success. So why has he changed it? So there are two main reasons why I think Simeone has gone to this system. It's really worth checking out Dermot Corrigan's work on The Athletic. He has looked at this a bit, but there's a couple of articles that provide a really, really great context into how Atleti achieved that 2013-14 league win, and also some of the financial problems that they had prior to that. They were a team who very much had to punch above their weight. They were not one of the glamour sides of Spanish football. And so part of what Simeone did by creating this mentality and creating this really aggressive, almost unpleasant style of football was to make a siege mentality among a group of players who really weren't that experienced, hadn't contested for big titles before necessarily. There were leaders in that dressing room, absolutely, people like Godin and Diego Costa, but at the same time, it was felt like, you needed to foster this environment of us against the world. And Simeone did that really effectively, and his football reflected that. So lots of time wasting, lots of fouls, lots of keeping it tight. It's, like I say, not pretty, but effective. Atleti have moved on now, and this is the first reason why this change has occurred. So they have better players. This is going to be like a really obvious point, but if you win La Liga and you then kind of consistently push up into the top 3 of Spanish football, stake a claim in that position, you're regularly playing Champions League football, you're going to get more money. And Simeone has brought in players like João Felix, Thomas Lemar, for example. He's also managed to sign players like Llorente from Real Madrid. And he's creating a squad which is more capable. Now, that is not to say anything critical about the 2013-14 side, but their strengths were that defensive resoluteness and the incredible punishing, aggressive ability of Diego Costa on the break. If that's what you've got to work with, that's what you work with. But after this period of sustained success, Simeone is now able to adapt. He's able to try and find room for these more creative players. You know, João Felix was a lot of money, £127 million. If you bring in a player like that of exceptional quality, what you also have to do is find a system that gets the most out of them. Similarly, with the signing of Luis Suarez, which was obviously quite a big deal given that he'd come from Barcelona, you need to adapt to make sure that you're surrounding a player of that quality and those talents with a system that works for them. So the way that Simeone has done this is by not losing some of the tenets of what they did. So some of the defensive shape will sometimes remain the same. The penetrating ability of the wing-backs, full-backs, that remains the same. There are still key characters there like Saul, like Koke. But this is a setup that is better equipped to allow these creative players the room to breathe, the room to do exciting things. When I said breathe there, I choked. That's funny. The other reason is that Simeone is kind of almost a victim of his own success. So when you look at Celta Vigo in that first fixture of this season, they were lined up in a kind of like a 4-4-2 sort of diamond shape. Now, a 4-4-2, and JJ on this channel also did a really great video on how Guardiola is harnessing aspects of the 4-4-2. The other place that the 4-4-2, apart from England, is really popular is actually Spain. So last season, 11, 12 sides in La Liga were regularly using a 4-4-2 as their starting system. So sides like Getafe, now that Bordalas has gone to Valencia, they're doing it. Villarreal were doing it. Going back a bit, Leganes were doing it. And what teams saw, particularly newly promoted teams, was that if you came into La Liga, there are going to be a couple of big sides like Real Madrid, Barcelona, Sevilla, that will look to bully you, that will look to hold massive amounts of possession, repeatedly attack you, defend by hogging the ball, this kind of thing. And it developed a system, and Bordalas at Getafe was particularly good for this. It developed a system whereby teams sat back, narrow, compact, in a 4-4-2 and looked to play the Atleti way. Hit teams on the break, try and punish them, press high. I think there's also something in the way that aspects of the 4-4-2 have been used in Austrian and German football now, and we see it, for example, in the Premier League with Hasenhüttl's Southampton. This sort of narrow, tucked in, very high press, very vertical 4-4-2. So you've got these two different types of 4-4-2, and they both exist a lot in Spain at the moment. And what that does, now that Atletico Madrid is one of the bigger teams and one of the teams that is expected to hold the ball and now has players of real quality that can do that, teams are playing against Atletico Madrid the way that Atletico Madrid used to play against teams, right? So if you go here, for example, the reason that this back three system is so important is because if you're playing lots and lots of teams that are playing with a front two, you want to be able to have that extra man there even before the defensive midfielder drops down, so that this pressing doesn't, cut you off. If you're playing him as a left back, for example, all of a sudden, let's get rid of some of these arrows to make it a little more clear, like this, all of a sudden it becomes much, much easier to stop the build-up at the back. And then you're going long again, and then your players like João Felix are being asked to chase long aerial passes or, stay up here and hope the ball's going to get to them, rather than playing it out from the back, stylishly progressing the ball, in an effective way that harnesses those creative attacking talents. I realised that I actually haven't put João Felix on the board at all, but I have mentioned him several times, so I know he exists. This is really the crucial reason that Atletico have adapted. It's because Spanish football paid attention to what they were doing, looked at how successful Simeone's system was, particularly punching above its weight against the bigger sides. It became a template, particularly for the sides that were promoted from the Segunda, as a way of staying up. And all of a sudden, Atleti are basically victims of their own success. Simeone's being copied, respectfully, by lots of other teams, and he has had to find a way around that. So in essence, I think that's why he's changed system. It's partly because he has better players, and it's partly because the environment of Spanish football has changed, has adapted, and that is an environment that he helped create. So it'll be really interesting to see whether Spanish football takes note now and starts trying to do other things that are like Diego Simeone, or maybe he'll just be left to do this by himself. Anyway, thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed that, and we will be back with various other videos that we probably haven't decided on yet in the near future. Thank you.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. There are journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.